From office visits with patients to her blogs laced with personal experiences and medical advice, Dr. Wendy Sue Swanson, or Seattle Mama Doc, pediatrician, mother, and recognized leader in the world of health blogging, isn't afraid to redefine doctor-patient communications.
This is just kind of who I am. I kind of live my life on my sleeve, and I'm very transparent about things. I'm very kind of emotive naturally. It's how I connect with people. It's how I connect with the patients that I see. It's how I connect with my friends and family. And so for me, it's a really easy step.
Self-professed tech nerd Kirk Robbins started as a molecular biologist until his passion for teaching led him to the elementary classroom. Now he works with educators to improve their science teaching and goes above and beyond with his blog, Science for All.
To me, that's the sign of a good leader, where the people, whatever the situation is, the group kind of feels like they arrived at something themselves, which they did.
Two people in very different professions, but with a common passion for learning and relationships.
Parents would come to me really concerned and confused about vaccines, and I would go through all the science, and I would talk about children that I'd seen die of vaccine-preventable illness, and I would talk about statistics, and I'd talk about large studies that were done in the Netherlands, and studies that were done in the US, and studies that were done all over the world that really said this is what science tells you and what it holds about vaccines. And then people would say, well, so what did you do with your son? I'd say, well, he got his shots on time. And they'd say, okay, Dr. Swanson, we'll do it. And I think like, oh my God, I just spent 10 minutes trying to talk about all the science that I knew and all my medical training that I held and what I really believed. And then when I told my story of how I used that information in my own life, families were really able to relax and be trustworthy of the profession, but also of the decision making. What I realized, it was really kind of that coming together and the consensus both of experience and storytelling and expertise that came together to really help families feel better. Children's and I came together to say, well, we're going to do this blog, and so when Jenny McCarthy goes on Oprah and they talk about vaccines, instead of just being the 30-second time spot on the news and having someone else write the story, can we generate kind of on-time response of a credible place for families to go where we can say, hey, here's a pediatrician and here's her thoughts. And so I both kind of melded that idea of, well, I'm willing to tell my story about my family and my journey of motherhood and parenthood with my husband and partner, that here's what it feels like to be doctors taking care of kids, and here's what it just feels like to be a mom, and here's my doctor hat and my mom hat, and that's kind of where the story came about. My goal is to be as authentic as I can be, that if I'm going to align families with doctors again and align physicians with patients again, I really believe we have to regain a sense of trust together. But sometimes I miss the mark, and so that's why comments and being open to having people give you feedback can be really helpful. I think ultimately I'm getting better at this because I'm doing this. I ultimately think we all need to be online because I think that's where families are, and we are getting less and less time with patients offline, that I think we all have to be there. But how you're there, it can be very individualized. How patients learn about me, of what they see on Twitter, or how I learn even about my patients on Twitter, that they will tweet messages to me and tell me things about their children. It's relevant on some level. It's not breaking privacy. It's just changing the way that we seem to understand each other. So when we walk in the room, they already know what I think about solids introduction and the risk of obesity, or they may know what I think about the new vaccine schedule, or they may have more questions about it, or they may know that I've had a really hard week. And that's just something that we know about each other. It doesn't necessarily detract from my ability to care for their child. It hopefully enhances it.
The teacher in me, I think one part of good teachers is that they want to share stuff, right? You find a lesson or you find something that was effective, and you want to tell your teaching partner about it. So that's always been a part of me for as long as I've been in education. So the idea that I could use technology to now share stuff with a much broader group than just somebody down the hall is very exciting. What's interesting is that I find there's still a lot of people in education who don't kind of see how those tools relate to education. So again, kind of going back to the leadership ideas, how can I get people to maybe think of a blog as something that's worth time to follow, or that maybe Twitter isn't, just for celebrities telling us about, kind of the minutia of their day. Teachers really they need to know that you're with them. So when I work with teachers, I always talk about we. And to me, I think we don't think about that enough in leadership. We always think of it as this strong, charismatic person who drives an agenda, and we don't think about, well, somebody has to follow that person. So the idea of that first follower. So I kind of see myself as that I try to take these ideas that other people have come up with or tools that they've created, and I'm just trying to lend some momentum to what they're doing and get the word out there and share things. It kind of gets people to the point where they almost think they came up with the idea. To me, that's the sign of a good leader, where the people, whatever the situation is, the group kind of feels like they arrived at something themselves, which they did, but maybe there was this catalyst. I guess I think of myself kind of as that I could be this catalyst for change. So for me, it's in science education.